Zebulun, Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Oh, hey. Hello. How are you doing this evening? This is the Abracast, and I'm your host, Dr. John Towers. I'm recording from the Red Lodge this evening, and I have to beg you guys for a little bit of, I have to beg apology from you guys. I missed a week. I've been doing 2 shows a week for, it feels like months now. So hopefully I garnered a little bit of goodwill from you guys. But here at the Red Lodge, at the Abracast, we practice what we preach. And I was offline for a week. I had some things that I had to do coming to prepare for, what we've been talking about, the fall of Western civilization. I got a new freezer for the house. I've been stocking up meats, delicious meats and cheeses and breads, and I got a big industrial-sized vacuum sealer. I got a new, I don't know if I should say this, I got another AR-15 tricked out with a bunch with all new stuff, that so I can hand my old one down to my wife. So now, two people are firing our fire team. So I had to get that straightened out. I got a bunch of these cargo boxes for dried good and emergency foods and gin. Literally, I walked out of the grocery store, or I walked out of the liquor store. Probably most of you guys might call it a state store, depending on where you're listening from. In Pennsylvania here, because we're a commonwealth of, and we're still under a bunch of like Quakerisms. We can only buy our liquor at a designated liquor store that the state runs. So you can see the problem. This, because when the pandemic first hit, they shut the state stores down, which caused a panic, an unrivaled panic and letter writing campaign and all kinds of problems. Luckily, I didn't go for wanting for too long. I was bootlegging stuff from West Virginia. I was having friends from West Virginia bring me stuff. I was driving out to Weirton, doing runs. I was going to artisan gin stores that were able to run from. I don't know how it works. It's like if you are like a local producer, you're allowed to have like some kind of stores. So anyhow, a friend of mine turned me on to that. I was like running out there. So on Friday, I was leaving the liquor store with over $100 worth of gin to put in these crates, and I'm keeping inventory. I feel like I'm a manager at Starbucks with my clipboard and my checklist of all the stuff that are in my free. Anyhow, it's been a whole project, and like I said, new guns. I got all kinds of stuff going on because I'm paying attention to the stuff that I'm talking about on the show. So I guess this is a pretty good segue into me talking about my vessel of the art. I have a vessel of the art right here, and my formula for a weapon of mass distraction, my Jin Jihad. So I'm lubed up a little bit so I can talk to you guys, let you guys know what's up. So the first thing I want to talk about is this episode is sort of like going to be a catch-up, catch-all, current events, and also revisiting a few things, because we have to revisit a few things, because I got a little bit of a pushback over a comment that I made about stakeholder capitalism in my Great Reset, the fall of the death of Western civilization episode, where I said stakeholder capitalism isn't about me and you. And a person reached out to me and they were like, literally, it's about me and you. The difference between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism is shareholder capitalism is all about making profit for the people who hold the shares, and stakeholder capitalism is about everyone. It's about the people that use the products, the people that don't use the products, the people that, because they don't use the products, but it affects them because of the environment. It affects them because of, the carbon footprints, and it affects them because of how their people, if their people listen to Joe Rogan on Spotify or whatever. This is the ESG score that I was talking about. So I wanted to readdress this, and it's a complicated issue, right? And one of the reasons it's complicated is because, and this is something that I've been talking about since the beginning of the show. Literally, I used to threaten listeners that I was going to do a whole show about the meaning of fascism and how it's different than Hitlerism or nationalism or militarism. I mean, whatever. But literally, fascism just means what people call now a public-private partnership. So people don't understand what that means. So even though it's stakeholder capitalism, even though I hold a stake because I live on the fucking planet, like the people that make the decisions about what's good for stakeholders aren't me and you. There are these elites that we've been talking with, the Davos crowd and all this stuff. So I found this article, Stakeholder Capitalism is a Trojan horse for fascism, and we're just going to go through this. I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing. I have a lot of stuff to get through tonight because I fucked everyone over last week. So this is Vinny. Oh boy, I should have went. Vinay Kolhatkar. Vinay Kolhatkar. They wrote this. Whoever, I'm not sure if this is a female or a male. I don't know. With a weird name like that, Vinay Kolhatkar. December 19th, 2020. They wrote this. Actually, maybe I should start over here first. God damn it, I should have thought this out more. All right, we're just going to go for it. Fuck it, we'll do it live. If you wholly own a car, how would you feel if your local counselor can dictate a day a week when you must lend it to a complete stranger? If you wholly own an apartment, how would you feel if the local parish was given the right to inject 2 new residents to live in it, picked at their discretion, and at your cost, too? Now consider a case where you have a fractional ownership of a holiday home. This means the initial outlay and the costs are split among a group of owners. Typically, you may get to use or rent it out to your monetary benefit 1 week every year, say by scheduling your right to do so. A deed may govern the rights and the usages of transfer and obligations to contribute or share towards maintenance and other dues. Shareholders, an aggregate of 100% owners of the corporations, but each shareholder is a fractional owner. As a group of owners, shareholders' rights are obligations. They're governed by contracts they enter into explicitly or in public listed corporations. Their rights are set out at law. Shares in public listed entities typically come with no further obligations to make contributions, only with rights to participate in new capital raise, vote at shareholder meetings, sell shares, etc. The idea that third parties should have a divine right to dictate shareholders or other interests in corporations they own must serve is absurd. It's as nonsensical as bureaucrats and priests having a right to dictate how we must use assets we own. The law already contains provisions to penalize fraud and deception, shareholders, quasi-shareholders, and indeed corporations as legal entities in their own rights are subject to law. So capitalism. We think of capitalism as a political system, to use Ayn Rand's words. The authentic version is a full, pure, uncontrolled, unregulated, laissez-faire capitalism, the separation of state and of economics, the way and for the same reasons as separations of state and church. Every citizen and resident of a nation states is a stakeholder or an affected party. In the social, economic, and political systems that govern the nation, communism, capitalism, and fascism are systems that need no prefix to suggest a specific class of stakeholders redefines them. And yet dangerous redefinition is what's suggested by the term stakeholder capitalism. So another way to think about this, the craziest way to think about it, if you ever owned a business, you ever had a board, if you ever have shareholders, so board members are put in the boards to increase the profits of the shareholders. That, a rising tide raises all boats, they would say. So the situation that we're in now is the board members are now put in a position to where they don't, their main goal is not to raise the profitability of the product for the shareholders. It is to smear it across the sock of wokeism by this ESG score, the environmental, social, governmental score, using these metrics and not the metrics of profit. You're smearing it. So I don't know if this person is going to get into this deeply, but the pushback that we're experiencing with ESG is that people, we'll say conservatives or rhinos or people that believe in the quote the capitalist system unquote. They're like, hey, these are private companies; they could do what they want. This is the free market. But my position of other people, I'm not the only guy bitching about this. The position is that this is not a free market. These people are brainwashed, or they're taking orders for one reason or another. They're organized by this Davos crowd. It's ubiquitous. They're permeating this idea that is anti-capitalist, which is it's not about the profit. It's not about the profits to the shareholders, which is the rising tide that lifts all boats. It's about this bullshit cumsock capitalism. So the author, the writer, asks, what is fascism? Before we turn to how the redefinition moves individuals towards ceding control of the collective, let's pause and assess what we mean by fascism. To use Ayn Rand's words again, the main characteristic of socialism and communism is public ownership of the means of production, and therefore the abolition of private property. The right to property is the right of use and disposal. Under fascism, men retain a semblance or pretense of private ownership, but the government holds total power over its use and its disposal. Again, this is not a free market. This is Facebook going in front of Congress saying, yes, we believe you should regulate us so we could do your will. Yes, let the hatred flow through you. Now let's ask, who owns the corporations? Who is being given the right to interfere in how the asset is being used? It's government. It may not be total power. It's government. But it is partial infringement of the rights of the owners over their assets nonetheless. It's government. It's that kind of partial fascism, that stakeholder capitalism moves us further towards by design. So the deal is that even though they're saying, hey, this is for the people, this is for the good of this little beautiful blue marble that's rotating and flying through space, and we're all in it together. But we, the Davos crowd, we, the World Economic Forum, we, the Prince Charleses of the world, gets to talk about, we get to steer what's right for us as a world, as a planet. It's not really about what's best for you or me or everybody. If it is, let's just think about what's happening with the fucking gas prices for a second. Lunch Bucket Joe takes office, and the first thing he does is cripple us economically with gas prices. He shuts down our drill baby drill platform, our drill baby drill policy that we had, and where we were net exporters of natural gas and fossil fuels. He shuts it down. Then now what? Now what are we doing? Well, now we're buying oil. Who are we buying it from? Well, hold on. This might come up later, but I'll just spoiler alert. We're buying it from Iran. We're buying gas. We're buying oil from Iran. Yeah, we're buying oil from Iran. And guess who else we're buying oil from? We're buying oil from Russia. So let's take what's going on in the Ukraine. Just take a second just to talk about it. It's not on my list of things to talk about. We're not really talking about what's going on in Ukraine a whole lot this evening, but let's take a look at it. The decision-making process from Joe Biden, Lunch Pail Joe, Big Daddy, the big guy, plugs Biden. The first thing he does is cripple us economically. He needs to be taken away from the decision-making process. If you guys don't want to invoke the 25th, whatever, that's fine. But like, he's so embedded with corruption in Ukraine and in Russia and in China, he needs to get out of the decision-making process of this, because he's 120 totally percent corrupted by Ukraine, Russia, and China. I would like you to visit Abracast.com and go to the featured topic link and check out the little Joe Biden section we have, where we go through all of these things in depth. While you're there, you might want to stop by the Western philosophy section. We have a whole series of the philosophy of John Galt, who is just a character that Ayn Rand wrote about, and he just expounds the philosophy of Ayn Rand, and he talks about the free markets and so forth. So that's there. If you want to know why that's interesting to me, that's right there. Here's an interesting quote from Ayn Rand. In a capitalist society, all human relationships are voluntary. Sorry. Men are free to cooperate or not, to deal with one another or not, as their own individual judgments, convictions, and interests dictate. They can deal with one another only in terms of and by means of reason, by means of discussion, persuasion, and contractual agreement, by voluntary choices to mutual benefit. The right to agree with others is not a problem in any society. It is the right to disagree that is crucial. It is the institution of private property that protects and implements the right to disagree, and thus keeps the road open to man's most valuable attribute, socially and objectively, the creative mind. So when we talk about socialism and communism, the Pilgrim episode, we've done it a billion times. The evil of socialism and the evil of communism is the stealing of genius. It's the stealing of incentive and genius that cripples them. That's why it never ever works. So, I'm not getting on my soapbox. I'm trying to explain why. I'm trying to explain why I made this erroneous comment that I kind of got pushback about. And now here's back to the article, Stakeholder Capitalism. And yet we have Stakeholder Capitalism. By definition of Investopedia, stakeholder capitalism is a system in which corporations are oriented to serve the interests of their stakeholders. Among key stakeholders are customers, suppliers, employees, shareholders, and local communities. Okay, so are we voting for these? Is every company taking polling data to see how all their shareholders feel about decision X or decision Y or policy B, or marketing campaign F? Like, who's making these decisions that's supposed to be for the benefit of the noble shareholder? In this version of capitalism, the proper owners/shareholders, it seems, are no more significant than the local communities and suppliers. Oh, here we go. They call Professor Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, made stakeholder capitalism the theme of Davos 2020. I'm going to skip ahead because we covered this in the Great Reset episode. Where am I going to land? Here we go. I'm going to skip to the end here of the section. In other words, since trillion-dollar corporations belonging to the collective, quote, us, unquote, the stakeholders, we can now use their resources to achieve our neo-Marxist goals of equalizing outcomes, not opportunities. Using decisive chants of racism, sexism, and environmental justice. Other influential leaders echoed Mr. Schwab's call. Naturally, member states of the United Nations, too, have enthusiastically signed on to the Great Reset. The reset. From July 2020, Schwab began to admonish us that if we don't use the COVID-19 pandemic as a timely opportunity to reset the world, the next big thing could be a cyber pandemic that would halt power supplies, transportation to the hospitals, etc. COVID-19 would be a small disturbance in comparison to those major cyber attacks, he says. It is like a forewarning. If Schwab is truly concerned, over 100 million privately owned servers worldwide will be infected simultaneously. Or is he a purveyor of panic? Like me, you are inclined to believe that the WEF chairman is a purveyor of panic. But ask yourself what his agenda is. Which is a great segue into what we're going to be talking about next. So for years, nay, almost a decade, we've been hearing about Russia and Vladimir Putin's hacking ability. Their perchance to hack, we'll just say. We're worrying about elections and power grids, and it doesn't seem to matter who's in charge. The media is telling us it's Russian hacking, whatever the problem might be. Is it election? Did the wrong person lose the election? It's election interference from the Russians. Did the wrong person win an election? It's election interference. The Russians hacked it. So I wanted to talk in the next bit of current events, the death of Western civilization, the dying Western civilization, current events. I want to talk about this thing that happened. It was called collective strength. Now, we've talked about these international war games before, right around election time. We talked about it, but let's talk about this one, taking into account all the shit we just heard about in the last sort of segment. The exclusive IMF 10-country simulated cyber attack on the global financial systems. Jerusalem, December 10th. This is December 10th, 2021. This is Reuters.com. This is Reuters, right? Israel on Thursday led a 10-country simulation of major cyber attacks on the global financial system in an attempt to increase cooperation that could help to minimize any potential damage to financial markets and banks. The simulated war game, is Israel's finance ministry called it, and planned over the last year, evolved over 10 days with sensitive data emerging on the dark web to simulate. Also used fake news reports, and the scenario caused chaos in the global markets and a run on banks. This is the important part. This is the key. The run on banks. Get your fucking money out of your banks. Keep it in your goddamn mattress or in a cargo box in your studio. The simulation, likely caused by what officials called sophisticated players, Russia, featured several types of attacks that impacted global foreign exchange and bond markets, SWIFT, liquidity and integrity of data and transactions between importers and exporters. Art Vandelay, your secretary, is calling. These events are creating havoc in the financial markets, said the narrator of the film shown to the participants as part of the simulation and seen by Reuters. Israeli government officials said that such threats are possible, and in a wake of a mainly high-profile cyber attacks on large companies, and that the only way to contain any damage is through global cooperation, since current cybersecurity is not always strong enough. The attackers are 10 steps ahead of the defenders. Michael Weiss, financial cyber manager at Israel's finance ministry, told Reuters. Participants in the initiative, called Collective Strength, included Treasury officials from Israel, the United States, the United Kingdom, the United Arab Emirates, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands and Thailand. So Germany and Italy being included, Austria, Switzerland being included, is interesting, as well as representatives from the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and Bank of International Settlements. The narrator of the film in the simulation said governments were under pressure to clarify the impact of the attack, which was paralyzing to the global financial system. The banks are appealing for emergency liquidity assistance in a multitude of currencies to put a halt to the chaos as counterparties withdrew their fund. That's us. We're counterparties. When we see the financial system collapsing, we go and try to get our money out of the banks. We withdraw our funds and limit access to liquidity, leaving the banks in disarray and ruin, the narrator said. So what happens when you go to a bank and you get money out, or you go to the ATM and you get money out, all your money's not in there. Say you got a $2,000 in the bank. Like, the bank's not really holding on to 2,000 of your dollars. It's not like the old days where the fucking cowboys dragged the vault door off using a locomotive or something like that. Like, that doesn't happen. It's all digital. So when too many people try to go and get their money out of the bank, that's what's called a run on the bank. The participants, and so if there's not enough money in the bank to give you your money, if they're like, oh, we actually don't have $2,000 here to give you, which are your $2,000, by the way, we're just going to close. That's what's called a run on the bank. The participants discussed multilateral policies to respond to the crisis, including coordinated bank holiday, debit repayment grace periods, swap repo agreements, and coordinated delinking from major currencies. Rav Shalom Revivo, head of Israel's financial cyber engagement, said international collaboration between finance ministries and the international organizations is key for the resilience of the financial ecosystem. The simulation was originally scheduled to take place at the Dubai World Expo, but it was moved to Jerusalem due to the Omicron variant of COVID-19, with officials participating over video conference. So there's a lot here to kind of unpack and to talk about. So months or years maybe before coronavirus pandemic, these guys ran, not these specific guys, but a war game was ran to talk about what happens if a novel coronavirus hits. And this took place in 2018, I guess. Hold on. Hold on for 1 second here. It was called Dark Winter in 2018. America's pandemic war games don't end well. One simulation of an uncontrolled disease outbreak concluded with riots. National Guard on the street. This is written by Mark Perry of foreignpolicy.com in June 22, 2001. Oh, so this is 2001. Hold on. There's a newer one. Hold on. All right, I'm sorry for the confusion. So it's interesting that they were doing this in 2001, but listen to this. This is the Daily Mail, a Daily Mail article. We planned for this. The White House claimed they had a pandemic plan in 2018 and reveal its existence after 86,000 dead and 36 million lost jobs. So they run these war games and these extreme situations. They're called war games because they actually started. It's like fucking Risk or something like that, right? So they run these war games and they have a bunch of round heads in the room, and they all talk about what they would do, what would we do, and what would this happen if if someone were, in this case, attacking our cyber infrastructure, or attacking, hacking banks or whatever. So I just feel like it's interesting that they ran these things, and then when it happened, everything just shit the bed. Okay, so let's tie it up in a little bow. What does Professor Klaus Schwab saying, truly concerned that over All right. What is Professor Klaus Schwab saying? From July 2020, Schwab began to admonish us if we don't use the COVID-19 pandemic as a timely opportunity to reset the world. The next big thing could be a cyber pandemic that would halt power supplies, transportation, hospitals, etc. COVID-19 would be a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack. He says it like it's a forewarning. So what does him saying that and these guys, Israel and all these bankers running war games about a cyber attack on the global financial system have to do with today? What does it all have to do with today? What does it all have to do with what's happening right now? U.S. Wall Street Journal. U.S. banks are prepared for Russia sanctions, but concerns grow about potential hacks. The U.S. financial institutions are largely prepared to handle a new round of Russia-related sanctions. These sanctions were just bullshit anyways. Like I said, we're still buying oil from Russia, so how many teeth do these things have right now? In the wake of the invasion of Ukraine, given the steady ratcheting up of pressure against Russia over the past 8 years and the recent warnings of such measures from the Plugs Biden administration, according to experts with knowledge of the U.S. banking sector, the expanding conflict, however, will present some additional challenges for U.S. banks and from how they manage their correspondent banking relationships to possibly retaliatory cyber attacks deriving from Russia. Several major financial institutions declined to comment publicly on their plans in light of the sanctions, but retaliatory hacks are a major worry. Several individuals connected with the U.S. banking industry said. One of the people added that the Plugs Biden administration official, literally, if you don't understand why I'm calling him Plugs, go look at what he looked like in the 1990s, where he was calling urban schools racial jungles. Go look at his hairline then and look at it now. You tell me while I'm calling him Plugs. Plugs administration officials have told banks they intend to share intelligence among multiple U.S. agencies in order to mount quick response, but the officials haven't spelled out what the responses might be. What is SWIFT and how could it clip Putin's financial wing? So SWIFT is just the underlying system that allows transfer between different states. It seems like it's sort of a big deal if you take it out. If you get money wired to you from England or something, it's going on the SWIFT account. Anyhow, back to it. On Thursday, the Treasury Department issued a directive banning U.S. financial institutions from opening or maintaining correspondent banking accounts for Russia's biggest banks. Sberbank Bank is subsidiaries, effectively cutting them off from U.S. financial systems starting on March 26th. The directive is part of the latest sanction package from Plugs Biden's administration that also includes sanctions from Russia state-owned VTB Bank and the new debt and equity restrictions on more than a dozen Russian entities. The U.S. and its allies unveiled further sweeping sanctions against Russia after Moscow launched what President Joe Plugs Biden called an unprovoked or unjustified attack on Ukraine late Wednesday night, New York time. Over the past 2 days, Western nations imposed a first round of sanctions on 6 Russian banks and Russian sovereign debt, as well as on several wealthy Russians linked to Putin's inner circle. The U.S. sanctions froze assets held by blacklisted companies and individuals within U.S. jurisdictions and prohibited U.S.-based individuals and firms from doing business with them, unless permitted by the U.S. Treasury Department. So I'd like to see who's exempt from that list. Despite the prospect of increasingly harsh sanction regime. The U.S. banks will likely have operational processes and procedures in place to ensure compliance with sanctions, according to Eric Young, a former chief compliance officer for French bank BNP Paribas SA Americas region. He said the financial service industry dealt with the impact from Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and has gained experience managing multiple evolving sanction regimes and other trade restrictions in other years, including those related to China and Venezuela. Young added that the Ukraine crisis evolved over many weeks, and that the Biden administration said ahead of time the sanctions would be in a response to a further incursion to the country. Here. Many banks employ former staffers of the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Asset Control, which implements and enforces sanctions in their own compliance departments, enabling them to better navigate what can be a complicated regime. Yet how fast and how soon and how quick this sanctions regime escalates will be a true test to all industries, including the financial industry, said Young, who is now a senior managing director at a consulting firm, Guidepost. Solutions LLC. Even from banks with no direct operations or businesses in Russia, an expanse of sanctions could mean more scrutiny from U.S. regulators. The correspondent banking relationships with overseas financial institutions, Young said, banks are required to conduct enhanced due diligence and know your customer onboarding process when doing business with foreign financial institutions to ensure compliance with U.S. sanction laws, but correspondent relationships are typically complex and yada, yada, yada. The U.S. banks could be subject to retaliatory cyber attacks from Russia in response to the sanction measures from the West, said Alex Zerdin, a former U.S. Treasury official in the Obama and Trump administrations. If the question about the intentional and unintentional impact could be from the sanctions, said Zerdin, now the principal of financial technology and risk advisory firm Capital Peak Strategies, LLC, the U.S. officials have for weeks been warning businesses about hacks, either as direct retaliation for U.S. action in Ukraine or as indirect spillover threats for cyber attacks in the Ukrainian-based businesses. Officials said that they aren't currently monitoring any specific threats against U.S. firms. So remember when this was a couple months ago, but there was a flap about something that got hacked, and Biden through Jen Psaki or whatever was like, look, this is a private business problem. Like, we don't need to help them with their security, internet security infrastructure. I'm not going to pull it up, but take my word for it. Something like that was said where they're like, it's not our problem. You think the Russians are hacking you? So fucking what? You deal with it. That's the gist of it. Russia had previously employed cyber attacks during a period of tension with Ukraine. In 2017, hackers linked to Russia launched the so-called NotPetya cyber attack, which affected not only entities in the Ukraine, but also in Europe and the U.S. Last week, Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo, together with officials from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, met with 11 banking executives to discuss cyber threats. The Ukraine crisis wasn't mentioned in the Treasury readout from the meeting, but the panel discussed efforts to protect the cybersecurity infrastructure and to defer malicious cyber activities. Financial Service Information Sharing and Analysis Center at Reston, Virginia, based industry consortium that seeks out to reduce cybersecurity risk in the global financial system, has issued guidance to its members on a proactive measure that they can take to defend their systems and data. FSISAC Chief Chief Executive Steven Silberstein said in a statement, the group that advises the few best practices, including encrypting network traffic and implementing access control to limit what users can do in a database according to guidance. Our global intelligence team is continuing to actively assess the situation through enhanced monitoring and cross-border threat intelligence sharing across the financial service sector, Silberstein said. Well, that clears it all up. Look, what's happening in Canada, what's happening here, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Davos, I'm just saying, let's be prepared as a people. Let's do, and I hate just doing all these kind of scary episodes, but I feel like sometimes I'm the last sane man buying freezers and guns, dragging them through my house. Like, I just want everyone to be safe and be prepared for what's going on. Get your money in your fucking mattresses, you sons of bitches. I'll let Hilla tell you the rest. This is Dr. John Towers signing out of the Abracast via the Red Lodge. See you in a few days.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past. Put your present in context and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abracast Tarot card deck. Your body is your temple. So let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes. More bonus audio. Additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com.